So this evening, we're very excited to have Carolyn Tillie, the co-founder of BACH, doing the second BACH concerto. She'll be presenting for us a preview of her Oxford Symposium presentation on traveling silver. So Carrie Tillie.
Thank you very much. My name is Carolyn Tillie, and I am a trained metalsmith. I went to cooking school, and I'm a devout Anglophile. In December of 2021, I was given an unprecedented opportunity to meet with Janine Scarry, the metals curator of Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia. Surprisingly, this American museum's hoard is one of the single largest collections of British-made old Sheffield plate in the world. In thinking about the Food Symposium's theme of portable food, I inquired about seeing just travel-related items from their collection. It is the vanguard of British metalsmithing during the Industrial Revolution which steered this investigation. As such, it is important to give you a little metalsmithing 101 as background. The history of cutlery production in Britain goes back to the genesis of crafts guilds in the 1300s and is important as it was an era defined by one's trade or profession. The Worshipful Company of Cutlers, those who specifically fashioned blades, was formed in the 13th century and received a royal charter in the early 1400s. If you could afford to commission a knife or a sword, you would go to a cutler. But the bladesmith would not be the same person who fashioned the leather sheath or the wooden handle. The cutler was responsible for the blade alone, subcontracting mountings or buckles in gold or silver from a goldsmith or a silversmith. The two artisans shown here illustrate the difference between working in ferrous metals like iron and steel of a knife blade and non-ferrous metals such as copper, silver, or gold. The basic difference in their technique is that ferrous metals are worked hot, meaning they are heated up and taken from a forge and struck and formed while the metal is glowing red, as you see in the picture. Non-ferrous metals are heated up and then plunged into water to cool, which softens them. Then they are hammered and shaped accordingly. Long before the Industrial Revolution, it was normal practice for everyone, namely gentlemen, to carry their own cutlery, especially a knife. And owning fine equipage was a statement of wealth or prestige. I wanted to show you these two opulent examples which speak to the quality of items that could be made and acquired by the well-to-do. Both have been gilded in gold, but the set on the right includes a beaker as well as the cutlery with handles that detach to fit inside a wood and baize frame. We will see a design like this again later, but I want to briefly describe gilding, which is an ancient technique of plating where gold and mercury are mixed into a paste, painted on, and when heated, the gold attaches to the metal underneath while the mercury dissipates, usually to the health detriment of the craftsman. In 1743, a gentleman walked into Sheffield's cutler's company with a broken knife, which may very well have looked like one of these. Thomas Bolsover, the craftsman tasked with repairing the utensil, accidentally overheated the knife, almost melting the metal. Looking closely at the damage, he could easily discern two separate layers, one copper and one silver. As he continued the repair, he observed that once fused together, the copper and silver behaved as one cohesive material. Thus was old Sheffield plate, also known as OSP, invented, and with it, a burgeoning industry of manufactured metal goods, affordable for a middle class with upper class aspirations. Close plating, around since medieval times, was a craft in which a thin layer of silver was applied to an already manufactured article made of a base metal, usually iron or steel. The disadvantages to close plate was that if an item got too hot, the silver would disappear, or if an item got wet, the plating would peel off. So most objects made in close plate were small cutlery items, buckles, and buttons, and very few of those have survived intact. What made old Sheffield plate revolutionary was that the base metal, usually copper due to its malleability, was clad in sterling, heated until the silver fused to the copper, and then rolled out into sheets, which could then be fashioned into anything from cutlery to pitchers to teapots. No matter how thinly the sheet was rolled out, the copper always retained its silver covering. Bolsover first applied his invention to the manufacture of buttons and other small wares, like snuff boxes and buckles. With this snuff box, the top monogrammed button is in sterling, made because an engraver's tool would have scribed too deeply into OSP and exposed the copper core. In both examples, and more so in the buttons on the right, the silver has worn down and copper is now visible. Within 20 years of his invention, Bolsover had moved on to other things, namely casting steel and saws, as well as providing the raw OSP plated sheets to other manufacturers who saw more of their potential. Silver cutlery would once have been limited to the very wealthy and landed gentry, as they alone could afford the hand forging required in its creation, as depicted in the process shots of the spoon on the left. The first industrial revolution, approximately 1760 to 1840, was a period of transformation evidenced by the evolution of new manufacturing processes and the accompanying changes in production methods, especially as related to iron and steel production, coupled with increasing use of steam power, enabling the development of machine tools and the rise of mass production, like the spoon on the right. While die stamping items like coins is an ancient craft, the earliest silver-plated specimens of die-stamped items, those from around 1700, do not exhibit the clear and sharp definitions found in later designs, as the dies themselves could not stand up to the hard strain of continuous stamping. That changed in the 1800s, when improvements had been introduced in the process of hardening and tempering cast steel. In the beginning, OSP was almost solely in the hands of cutlers, the bladesmiths, but silversmiths very quickly saw fused plate as a substitute for sterling, as smithing techniques which had been used for centuries worked for fused plate as easily as sterling, that of raising, fabricating, chasing, and repoussé. The quality of the items being produced lifted the craft to an artistic level. This image shows a platter that has been stamped and swaged, but with various silver mounts for handles, feet, and borders, as they would have appeared right after being die stamped, before being soldered on. The man on the right might have done nothing all day long but stamp out decorative elements for someone else to attach. As our Oxford theme is about the portability of food, I'm sure you're wondering when we're getting to the travel equipage. Most of it blossomed at the turn of the 18th century. This is one of the earliest sets of OSP in the Colonial Williamsburg collection. The traveling tea service includes a pot, sugar bowl, cream boat, and waste bowl. Note how the top of the teapot comes off so that all the accompanying pieces nestle inside. An open scrolled handle for the cream pitcher screws on and off, and the teapot's handle also comes off with a bit of brilliant engineering. You can see the detail of the side of the teapot with its broad rectangular body and gadrooned moldings above and below a contracted neck. The removable wooden handle of open design with plated sockets has flanges to brace itself, engaging the fittings on the side of the pot. It just slides up and then locks into place. It probably had a box to protect and transport it at some point, but that is now missing. Another elegant nestled set from the same era is this large bowl set, which also fully nests together. Gilt-lined silver plate, we are looking at items that would have been purchased by the fairly well-to-do. It is assumed that the smallest piece, the one with the hinged lid on the bottom right, is a mustard pot that may have had a glass insert. The top right is a spouted creamer, but the spout is a little hard to see in this image. And the smaller two bowls could assume to be for sugar and a waste bowl. These types of sets could be for family outings or for the solo gentleman traveler. Remember that ornate gold set that I showed earlier? Well, this is that recurring design that surprised me in my research, as I had never seen one before, and then it seemed to pop up every century or so in different iterations. A traveling canteen like this is secure in its own tooled leather velvet-lined carrying case, which includes an OSP beaker accompanying the knife blade, fork tines, and spoon bowl, all with detachable handles, and a wooden block into which everything fits. The gentleman would have had his utensils to dine with and a cup to drink from. This set is dated to about 1830, which is the same era as an important turning point in this investigation. That involves the railroad and the expansion of the British Empire. The Stockton and Darlington Railway line opened in 1825 and is considered the first passenger train. But travelers didn't become important cargo until the 1840s. Still expensive for many agricultural workers at 4 shillings a trip for the Liverpool to Manchester line, a mere 31 miles. The Gladstone Act of 1844 introduced the parliamentary train, which enabled third-class travelers to pay a penny a mile. A mere decade earlier, in 1835, only 350 miles of railway existed, but by 1850, there were 6,300 miles of train track, forging a path towards leisure and the newly opened seaside resorts available to clerks, shopkeepers, and managers. As their wealth grew, so did their desire towards finery. And while it was the landed gentry who afforded sterling, this newly growing middle class would be able to acquire plate, which looked exactly like the real thing. When I began this research, it was because I assumed that it was for leisure and the expansion of railroad travel. I had not anticipated an entirely different aspect which drove market forces, that of the soldier and the vast array of portable equipage designed specifically for the officer heading off to, quote, the frontier, be it Afghanistan, the Crimea, or India. This compact fork and knife set, which dates to the late 1700s, was not only used by travelers, but by military officers in the field. This extraordinary example from Colonial Williamsburg has a distinct advantage in history for its known provenance, as well as its unique design. The handles are white and green stained ivory set into metal, into which the user would simultaneously slide the fork tines into the cavity of the knife, while sliding the blade of the knife into an identical space in the fork handle. Held in place by friction, the two utensils were safely stowed for transport. The set has been attributed to a Sheffield artisan named George Patton, and we know the original owner, one David Deschler, was born in Heidelberg and emigrated to Philadelphia around 1730. While Deschler may have been merely a traveler, a nearly identical set was once owned by George Washington, as well as becoming an intensely popular design during the Napoleonic Wars through the Boer War a century later, as evidenced by this collection, which was presented to me by a collector in Australia who offered me a photo from just part of his collection. I'm not going to add political commentary about British imperial expansionism, but it needs to be mentioned in context of accoutrement, as it was a surprise to uncover the vast offerings made available to soldiers. On the right, what had previously been sold as a bachelor set was now marketed as a campaign mess kit. Along with the retractable utensils to fit within the cup, it also included a cylindrical condiment holder engraved with the words salt, pepper, and mustard, all of which fits within a black leather clad box. This particular set and many other types of officer mess kits became available via the Army and Navy Cooperative Society Limited, a department store founded in 1871, specifically to supply goods to its members at the lowest prices available. This piece from Colonial Williamsburg was specifically marketed to officers, and I came across several versions within the collections of military memorabilia. It measures approximately 5 inches high and 5 inches across. The pegs which hold up the pot are entirely detachable, and everything fits within the pot itself. I've seen others which include a leather case for transport. And although this one is unmarked, it is probably from Sheffield or Birmingham and dates to about 1840, as determined by the copper shining through, meaning it is old Sheffield plate. We know it is not a later model by virtue of the fact that by 1850, fused plating, or OSP, was practically abandoned, supplanted by a new technology, electroplating. In 1800, Alessandro Volta invented the first electric battery, and within 2 years, his close friend, a fellow Italian, Luigi Brunatelli, laid the groundwork for the demise of fused plate with his invention of electroplating using silver fulminate. It would take another 40 years of experiment and refinement, with a number of British patents filed involving different chemicals and processes. But it was the Misters Elkington and Company of Birmingham who were the first to turn the invention into a practical, thriving concern. The difference between old Sheffield plate production and that of electroplating is that with OSP, the sheet is clad with silver and then the item is manufactured. With electroplating, metal items are placed in a bath containing dissolved salt of silver, such as silver nitrate. The metal item is connected to a negative electrode, and positively charged silver ions are attracted to the metal ion when an electric current is induced. The silver ions coat the metal. The layer of silver that has been electroplated is minuscule in comparison with fused plate. However, the discovery of electroplating vastly cheapened the cost and facilitated a process and production of plated ware that very soon killed the older one. New alloys were being invented, specifically German silver, which consisted of nickel, copper, and zinc. Copper had been the base metal in the production of OSP from its genesis in 1743 till about 1840, when German silver superseded it. Its use gave greater strength and was harder to wear than copper. And because it was white, the defects were less noticeable. While the landed gentry had their family and estates sterling, the rising middle class could begin to acquire their own silver sets, and none would be the wiser unless one looked at the stamps on the bottom, EPNS standing for electroplated nickel silver. This piece has been listed as a campaign silver plate spirit tea service for members of the officer class on the frontier, where maintaining decorum abroad socially as well as militarily became an extension of observing standards of behavior in England. The set consists of a kettle that doubles as a teapot with a fold-out bone handle and tea diffuser fixed to the lid with a chain, a spirit burner beneath the stand, and a creamer and sugar bowl. Note on the bottom right how the handle would have folded completely inside for ease of travel. Perhaps fueled by the Romantic movement, Picnics became all the rage in the 1800s, and the growth of inexpensive plate saw more availability of extraordinarily bespoke picnic baskets that included various plated accoutrements. Companies like G.W. Scott and Sons, wicker basket makers since 1661, started partnering with metalsmiths. And in 1897, the company advertised their novelty baskets under the name Soho Basket Works. By 1913, GWS&S were listed as celebrated manufacturers and original inventors of fitted leather luncheons and tea cases. This is another example by GWS&S in which the wicker basket contains a silver plate spirit kettle, canisters, glass jar with silver lid, ceramic plates, mugs, spoons, match safe, linen napkins, and a tea strainer. And while I was supposed to wrap this up with the Belle Epoque, I couldn't resist sharing a last discovery made of some dining equipage, again for the gentleman, that of the picnic cane. I think it was my beguilement of the interlocking fork and knife sets, which may have inspired some cane makers to construct them and be able to hold them within. And that's kind of where I end. So thank you.